If you are a photographer who already knows how to take good photographs, you understand good light, good exposure, good composition, but the moment that image lands on your computer, you pretty much freeze up. Then this discussion is definitely for you. That's how I know this isn't a small problem. It's the very thing standing between average photography and great photography. The lack of understanding about how the modern digital darkroom actually works. I'm going to give you an analogy that will ensure that you never forget or you are never intimidated by processing or editing software ever again. Let me ask you something. Do you know the difference between shooting JPEGs versus shooting RAW? Do you understand the difference between developing, processing a file, or editing a file? Do you sometimes feel intimidated or maybe just plain confused about whether you should be working in Lightroom, in Photoshop, Adobe Camera Raw, or Bridge? So here's the truth. None of it is anywhere near as intimidating as it looks or as it sounds. What most people don't realize is that today's developing and editing is yesterday's darkroom. It's one in the same, just explained properly. So by the end of this conversation, you are going to get two things. One, I'm going to give you access to a free companion guide so that you don't have to take notes during this discussion. You can just sit back, relax, and listen. And number two, I'm going to give you an analogy that will ensure that you never forget or you are never intimidated by processing or editing software ever again. So let me be clear about who this discussion is for. If you are a photographer who already knows how to take good photographs, you understand good light, good exposure, good composition, but the moment that image lands on your computer, you pretty much freeze up. Then this discussion is definitely for you. If you've got RAW files sitting on your drive somewhere that you've genuinely never opened because either you don't know how or you are convinced you'll damage them the second you touch them, then again, this discussion is for you. And if you're already an accomplished photographer and you have a confident workflow, developing and editing, well, stick around because if anything, you may just find this discussion quite entertaining. And look, before I even start, the comment on the clip that you heard in the beginning regarding the church and the house of ill repute is just an analogy. It's nothing more. I'll explain it to you later. So before you go and put a comment down, just wait it out until I get there. Today, we're going to talk about something really important in photography and especially important in today's digital era. What I really want to get to or get through in this discussion is the very reason why so many people don't follow through into proper high-level photography, even with a good quality camera. When I speak to a lot of my students who come into my programs, this seems to be one of the biggest stumbling blocks, especially for photographers who learnt on film, who came up through the darkroom era. And these type of folk tend to find that the software is simply just too confusing and doesn't make sense. You see, the modern darkroom or the modern digital workflow is genuinely foreign territory for so many people. And here's what's crazy. I get to see this play out all day long. I could be teaching a landscape masterclass and we're out there on location and we're looking at what is the best time to shoot and we're looking at the light and we're looking at all the things that actually make a landscape photograph sing. And I'll stop and ask any questions. Has anybody got a question? And inevitably, one or two hands go up. And it's not about light. It's not about location. It's about developing, processing, and editing, and particularly back to which software should be used. It's the same with my fine art photography workshops. We're surrounded by paint, by all kinds of wonderful mess. We're about to roll up our sleeves and get properly creative, and I'll ask the same question. Any questions here before we start? And once again, I guarantee you one or two hands will go up asking about developing and editing software. Two completely different workshops, two different subjects, same question keeps coming up. It's because it's the other side of photography. That's how I know this isn't a small problem. It's the very thing standing between average photography and great photography. The lack of understanding about how the modern digital darkroom actually works and what the software is designed to do in the first place. What you should be using, or maybe even more importantly, what you shouldn't be using, what workflow you should follow, and one that I think you shouldn't be following, and frankly, what they're scared to even open up in the first place. Taking the photograph generally doesn't seem to be much of the problem. Processing it and editing it, that's where the fear seems to lie, or the uncertainty, and maybe fear is too strong a word. So I want to clear this up today. I want to take you through a simple step-by-step walkthrough on how the software works, what you need, and how it should be used. My suggestions are based on my own experience and then an analogy that I mentioned previously, because I want to teach you to understand the difference between a raw file and a JPEG, and more importantly, the difference between developing or processing, the developing or processing of raw data versus the editing of a pixel file like a JPEG or a TIFF or a Photoshop file. So by the end of this, I hope you'll have a much deeper understanding of what's actually needed, and you won't be intimidated to get into digital photography anymore, or to be able to take your photography to a completely different level. And look, I know this is a lot to take in one session. So as I've already mentioned, I've put together a free companion guide that covers everything in this discussion step by step. So you don't have to remember it all now. So stay with me until the end and I'll give you the link to download, and it's free of charge. But I also suggest you don't download it without listening to this discussion. Otherwise, it's just not going to make sense. There is no doubt that digital processing is the other side of photography. Just like in the film days, the developing was part of the photography. If you couldn't develop your film, well, you could never realize it. It's pretty much the same today. It's one thing to capture an image with good light, good exposure, good focus, whatever creative approach you decide to use during that process. It's another thing entirely to bring that image from the camera into life. And there's no doubt in my mind, you have to be part of that process, the same way you were part of taking a picture in the first place. Nobody else out there can bring that image to life the way you can. You're the one who saw it through the lens. You're the one who controlled the exposure. You know what you want to say and how you want to evoke emotion from the viewer, what message you want to bring across. That's where the developing and editing really matters. So if you want to improve your photography, this isn't a maybe, it's a must. I'll say this up front too. For those who already are sitting there feeling quite intimidated or sort of half nauseous, it's not that difficult. You just need to understand that digital processing and editing came out of film photography. It was a development that developed right out of the darkroom, excuse the pun, into digital photography. You know, in film photography, we would develop a roll of film, that, well, what could I call it, the pure controlled darkroom space. We would take that developed film once it came out of the developing darkroom and we would put it on a light table. Let's call that the organizational space. And then you would decide on what you wanted to print, what you were going to discard, what you were going to file away, and what you would like to take further as a print. And then that negative or slide would head back into the darkroom space, but this time to be printed. So let's call that the editing space. So there was a developing stage, a preview stage on the light box, and a printing stage in the darkroom, each with its own process. Today, it's very similar. It's just digital. This is the secret to understanding how the software actually works. Look, I know there is a lot of software choices on the market today, and there's more and more rolling out, and most of it is basically online. So I'm going to present this discussion around the flagship tools most of us have come to know, and in some cases have come to fear, because you would agree with me, when you open up the software and you look at it, it just looks complicated. So I'm going to work with Adobe software, We'll go through the difference between Adobe Bridge and then Adobe Camera Raw. And we're also going to deal with the raw file itself. And I'll also draw a comparison between Bridge and Lightroom as organizing software. And then we'll also move into the wonderful world of editing, specifically with Photoshop. Now, that sounds intimidating, I know, but it isn't, so stick with me. I also think it's worth saying that when it comes to the price of the software today, because this is another excuse that I sometimes hear is, but it's just too expensive. But for around, what is it today? Around $20 a month, that gets you the best software you could ever wish to work on. Lightroom, for example, and Photoshop together on Creative Cloud, incredible tools that you can do everything you need to do and more. You just need to learn how to use them. But I suppose more importantly today, you need to learn the difference between them and why you would choose to use them. I must also mention there are strong alternatives worth knowing about if let's say Adobe is not your path. I mean, there's Affinity software. It's now owned by Canva, which is actually completely free, no subscription needed at all. You've got Capture One Pro, an excellent software, though I think today it's moved onto a subscription model as well. And of course, there's others. There is Luminar Neo, there is On One Photo Raw, and there's even GIMP if you want something completely free or open source. So, spoiled for choice. But before we even go any further, you also have a choice to make when even before you pick up the camera. I mean, the question is, are you going to be shooting on Camera Raw, or are you going to be shooting on a compressed JPEG file? Interesting question. By the way, JPEG, for those who are interested, stands for Joint Photographic Experts Group, the very group that created the standard. But what matters more is what it does. You see, a JPEG, in my opinion, is a convenience file, and it's not a quality file. And I'll explain why in a moment. A RAW file is the digital negative itself, the actual capture, the quality of the image. If you shoot RAW, which I highly recommend, the RAW file itself holds all of your image data. And from there, you need software to allow you to process it. When you were shooting on film, you needed chemicals in order to process it. Here, you need exactly the same. So when you choose to shoot on JPEG, so let's say you set up your camera and you've left your camera on JPEG, what are your instructions to the camera? What are you telling the camera? Well, what you're saying is, please photograph in RAW, because it's going to do that in any case. But when you're done, develop it automatically in camera into a compressed JPEG and throw the RAW file away anyway. I don't really need it. That is simply not acceptable in a quality workflow. People say to me, but I can shoot JPEG and I get good quality. Well, I disagree. I think you might be getting reasonable quality. Yes, but you could get so much better if you just shoot properly in RAW. If you choose to shoot in Camera Raw, what you are really saying to the camera is this: capture in the highest quality you can as a data file, and allow me, the photographer, using the correct software to develop the way I'd like that RAW file to behave once I call on it to become a pixel file. Now that's a big statement, so let me say it again. You telling your camera to take the photograph as normal, in RAW, the way it was designed, but hold that RAW file for me, because you, the photographer, wants to use specialized software to look at what you've taken and give specific instructions on how you would like it developed. Exposure, color, contrast, all of it. And only then turn it into a pixel file, whether that's a JPEG, PNG, Photoshop file, TIFF file, doesn't really matter, which you will decide upon later. So I ask you, which of these two scenarios do you think will give you the better quality? Where you allow the camera just to do its thing and write you a compressed convenience file, or where you take ownership over your workflow and control your photography properly? I mean, let me put it this way. Think of it like the old days. Imagine you photographed on film. So you walk into the lab and you hand your film over and you say, Develop this and print it for me. And when you're done, print me some nice small postcards that at least I've got a memory of everything. But then do me a favor and just throw the negatives away. The originals get discarded and you're left with a small handful of what? Convenient prints. Equally, this makes no sense with digital photography today. So then the question is, why do we do it? And the answer I get sometimes is frightening. I once asked someone with a fancy camera, a top of the range, expensive mirrorless camera, why he was shooting on JPEG. And the answer he gave me was, as I said, frightening. He said, it's simple. That's the way the camera came set up from the factory in the first place. Another person told me it's because she wants to save space on her memory card. Well, I told her that I have a basic philosophy, and it's simple. Time is expensive. Memory cards are cheap. Why are you doing this if you've got a high-end camera? What is the purpose? Why are you compromising quality before you even start? So if you're indecisive, you could, of course, then shoot a RAW plus a JPEG. Most cameras give you the option of recording both file formats. The RAW file is there for your quality and processing. The JPEG is there for your convenience, for posting on social media or just having a quick look through your pictures. But by the end of this discussion, you'll see there is really no reason to shoot a JPEG at all. Everything you need can be produced right out of the RAW file anyway. I tell you, let's do this just as an experiment. In the comments below, let me know, are you a JPEGer or are you a RAW convert? I really want to know. So, once you've taken the photographs and you've got your RAW files, what's the first thing that we need to do? So remember, darkroom. We developed the film, and now we walk out of the darkroom with a string of negatives or slides. What's the very next thing that we do? We go to the light table, and we look at what we photographed. And we check what we have done. We look for sharpness, we look for composition, we look for exposure. And now we're going to be doing exactly the same thing, except this time we are going to be using software to do that. So let's talk about where we can then get started. And I'd like to discuss two particular programs here. As I mentioned before, Adobe Bridge and Adobe Lightroom. That's often questions I get. Which one should I be using? So this is a decision you will need to make along the way as you get started with the software. Which one of these two would be more beneficial for you? And that is, of course, if you're staying with the Adobe products. My suggestion is you start with Bridge. Why? Because it's easier to work with initially. And once you get to work with it properly and you start to understand how it works, then I suggest that you earn the right to move over to Lightroom later. Both used here as a preview organizational tool. Both of these will allow you to look at your work, check the metadata, have a look and see what shutter speed you shot on, what aperture you used, when you took the photograph, what date you photographed it. You can check the exposure. You can check what lens you used. You can even check what camera you used. You can preview your images, reorder your photographs, rename them, group them, tag them, and build a library. It's basically a controlled management system. Now, I must tell you, years ago, Kodak brought out early software for exactly this job. And I loved what they called it. They named it Shoebox. The Kodak Shoebox Photo CD Image Manager, if I can remember correctly. I think that is a great name because it says exactly what it does. Where do our photographs end up? And I remember having a lot of film and slide pictures, and they just end up getting thrown into a shoebox where they can get sorted later. And that's exactly what the software is there to do. It's to help you sort out your photographs and hopefully help you to get rid of a whole lot of photographs that you should actually delete because they are of no good. So it helps you to bring order to your photography. Now, Bridge itself, Bridge is a pure light box. It lets you look at your files. It allows you to, like I said, tag your files and name them. And it also stores your raw developing information, which you will see later. So what's the actual difference between Bridge and Lightroom? Well, think of Bridge like walking into a library and going up to the librarian's desk and you say, I'm looking for this book by this author. The librarian will either check the index cards or will get onto the computer and say, yes, we have it. If you go down aisle this or what have you, and you go and check on shelf this, you will find it there. And that's where you go, and that's where you find the book. The librarian sends you to where the book is filed. Now, Bridge does basically the same on your computer. It will check all your hard drives or flash cards or whatever you've got connected to the computer, and it will go and find your work for you, and then allows you to manage your files from there. But, and this is very important, Bridge isn't a developer or an editor. So Bridge won't allow you to process your pictures or edit your pictures. It's a convenience software that allows you to see what you've got and organize what you've got and keep control over your work. Lightroom, on the other hand, isn't a librarian. Think of Lightroom as an entire library. Think of it as a building which has a front door and a back door. And you'll also see there are a couple of side doors as well, which we'll discuss as we get into Lightroom. As your file enters the front door, which is known as import in Lightroom, it gets indexed. It becomes part of the library itself. Lightroom imports pictures into its own catalog. When you're ready to actually edit a file in something like Photoshop, Lightroom will send it out, let's say, through a side door. Lightroom calls this edit in, and it hands the copy over to Photoshop automatically. And the moment you save it in Photoshop, then Lightroom will again automatically bring back that file through the import facility, and then it will file it that it sits right next to your original file in your library. So you don't have to go and import it yourself. This will happen automatically. So Lightroom is a space where an inventory of images is kept under your supervision as the photographer, grouped in a catalog on your hard drive. Everything coming in and going out is controlled by you. It's a self-contained imaging hub, if you like. So that's the main difference between Lightroom, but also Lightroom has a number of buildings attached to it. Remember, I said now it's an imaging hub. It's where your raw files can be stored, your raw files can be developed. Unfortunately, Lightroom doesn't have a complete built-in editor. It is primarily a developer. More on that in a moment. So let's take a step back here. So you start by looking at your pictures. You start by deciding what you want to keep and what you want to delete, marking what we are going to possibly be processing, categorizing, renaming, and we can do this in either of the two softwares. Remember, as I suggested, Bridge first and then earn the right to move to Lightroom, because Lightroom is powerful, but it requires real management and thoughtful setup. I mean, you need to decide where your catalogs are going to be put. You need to decide on your backup system. So first Bridge, then Lightroom. I mean, in the comments, let me know if you've used both Bridge and Lightroom, which of the two you would actually prefer, or which of the two you do prefer. Or are you that person who just sort of dumps the memory card onto the desktop and then goes on from there without proper software? I mean, I've even seen some folk who just never take the pictures off their memory cards. I mean, let us know, who you are and what you prefer. So we've found now a raw file that we would like to develop. We've gone onto Lightroom, we've gone onto Bridge, we've had a look, we've now decided we want to process a file. Now, I've been speaking a lot about and grouping two words together all the time. I've been saying we develop and I'm saying we process, but these are both descriptive words on how we will treat a raw file, and both of them are correct. If you've worked in Lightroom, you'll see Lightroom uses the word develop your file, but equally processing your file in RAW is correct. I think that just comes from the days when we used to develop a film. In any case, we used to process a roll of film. So both of these can be used one in the same. What is very different is the difference between developing and editing. Remember, the raw file, as I've said, is the data file. So it requires specialized software in order to help you to determine how it is going to be developed. So the software I want to talk about here is Adobe Camera Raw. It's known as ACR. It's software specifically designed to develop or process your raw file. The way it works is if you are in Bridge or in Lightroom and you double click on a file and it's a raw file, the software will identify the raw file and then send it to the correct place to be processed. It leaves the raw space and becomes a picture. That's raw developing versus pixel editing. You see, every raw file that gets used will eventually become a pixel file regardless. Whether you choose to use a picture in social media or whether you want to print something later, be it in a magazine, or whether you want to print a fine art print that you can frame and put on the wall. The point is that if it's purposed for any form of use, it's going to become a pixel file in any case. Adobe Camera Raw lets you take control of your data and sets the parameters on how it needs to behave once it's called into the world of editing. It's pixel life, if you like. You'll remember that there's 3 stages in analog darkroom photography that we discussed earlier. We've got developing, we've got the lightbox, and we've got the printing. So Camera Raw is your developing space. Bridge or Lightroom is your lightbox, and Photoshop is your printing stage, which today we call editing. So when we talk about the process that we are in, when we talk about our workflow, we are talking about 2 different things. We're talking about developing and processing our files, or we're talking about editing our files. They're 2 different processes. Now look, this is the gospel according to Martin. It's basically the clearest way that I can explain it. So the software to develop your files, if you keep the raw file rather than just throwing it away and keeping the JPEG, in this case is Adobe Camera Raw, or another raw developer on the market if you choose to use something else. You see, once your photographs are developed, you decide whether to edit them or not, or whether it requires any editing, because in the developing process, you might be able to get everything done that you need to be done, but you don't need to actually edit them. So you can use Adobe Camera Raw as a standalone software, which I highly recommend doing first. Or you can develop in Lightroom, which plugs into Adobe Camera Raw. It's exactly the same engine. Now, for those of you who've worked in Lightroom, you'll know that the layout is a little bit different. If you're working in Adobe Camera Raw standalone, the layout you would get used to, but then you go over to Lightroom and you'll see the tools are in slightly different places. But essentially, it's the same. Lightroom processes within its library space, within the building. You have the option then not only to view what you're looking at, but you can also, besides organizing your files, you can also develop them in Lightroom without leaving Lightroom, but it's the same software. So as I've alluded to before, Lightroom doesn't let you edit them in Photoshop. For that, the file needs to leave the library, get edited, and then it needs to be imported back in. Now today, the line between developing and editing has got a little bit blurrier. Lightroom's developing module is still built on the same Camera Raw engine as its core, but Adobe's added a tool called Generative Remove in there now, a proper generative AI editing tool alongside the developing tools we've come to know and love. Who knows where it's going to be going next, but for now, I'll keep teaching you the clean version of the system because it's still the right way to think about it. Just know that the walls or the boundaries between editing and developing is just getting thinner nowadays. So let's get back to developing then. When a raw file gets developed, the moment you start to work on it, the moment you move a slider, the software marks it as a developed file. So in the case of Adobe Camera Raw and Bridge, it attaches an XMP file, a small sidecar file. And in this is where every instruction you have given gets recorded. Whether you change your exposure, your color, your contrast, whether you work in selected areas, doesn't matter. Whatever you do in Camera Raw, the moment you start doing it, this XMP file is then generated where it records all of the adjustments. And it attaches itself to the main file. And all of the updates then remain with the main file itself. So for every raw file that has been developed, in Adobe Camera Raw, working through Bridge, in every raw file that has been developed, there's a second file that is attached to it. And think of it like a shark swimming around with one of those sucker fish on the shark that's attached to it. That's the analogy of a sidecar file that has attached itself to the raw file. So Bridge and Camera Raw are built to make sure that the raw file and its sidecar file are always seen together and considered together. This means that you can always see in preview in Bridge what your latest updates are, where you are with your processing with a specific file. It's worth noting that Lightroom actually works a little differently. It keeps all your developed information inside its own catalog by default, not automatically in a sidecar file. If you want that XMP sidecar written out as well as let's say a backup, for example, you need to actually turn it on. I think in Lightroom, it's a command that says something like automatically write changes into XMP in your catalog settings. And for those of you who are working in Lightroom, I actually think it's a good habit to do it, because your edits are only as safe as the catalog itself. So if you lose the catalog, you lose the edits. But if you are exporting your files and backing up your files, then rather record the XMP file that it can stay attached to your raw file. So whichever way you're working, whether it be in Lightroom or in Adobe Camera Raw, when you open the file again, it immediately shows you that changes have been made, and it shows you the last changes that have been applied. So you can see exactly what you've done, and you can continue to edit it. So you can continue to make changes, or of course you can clear the sidecar file or the record of the editing, and you can start all over again. Either way, that is your choice. But I want to make this really clear. A raw file cannot be edited. It's your original captured data. It's untouched data. Once you're happy with your changes, you can save and leave it in your library just for another day, or when you come back to continue your developing from where you left off. Or, like I've said, you can start all over again. When you're ready to actually use the picture, like I've said, on social media, or you want to make a print of it or anything like that, then the raw file gets developed according to your instructions, and a new file then is generated. And this new file is called a pixel file. A pixel file is not a raw file. It needs to go into editing software in order to be edited. So it cannot be edited in the raw space. It has to leave the raw space and go into the editing software where it can then be used or formatted. And that's where I want to talk to you later about the analogy I've been talking about when we talk about the church and the house of ill repute, because that's going to help you to be able to understand what is going on here and what the two different softwares will do. So the editing program that we're going to be using is Photoshop, the flagship of editing software today. It's almost as if the pixel file is born out of the raw file as it leaves the raw space. And once it arrives into the editing software like Photoshop, honestly, the gloves really come off. That's why we call the developing and processing stage a pure space, a non-destructive processing space. Once it becomes a pixel file and it turns up into an editor like Photoshop or any other editor out there, it can be edited freely. And this is where, if you're not careful, the images can get damaged. We call it pixel bashing. And that's why it is called that's why it is called destructive editing as opposed to non-destructive processing. So a good workflow policy is to process and develop as much as you can in the raw space, and only bring the pixel file into the editing space once you are done. applying then only final changes in the editing process that you couldn't do in the raw developer. And I promise you today, in the raw developer, there is so much that we can do in any case. But there are things we can't do, and that's where the editor can help you. But keep in mind, all files, if they are going to be used, need to become a pixel file in any case. Okay, so it might not make complete sense yet. I understand this. So allow me to give you the analogy I've been talking about, and this will help you to grasp the concept. Hopefully not only to grasp it, but a concept that perhaps you will hopefully never forget. I want you to imagine a road running through a town. One side, a beautiful church, impressive building, a landmark, if you like. And directly across the road, due to whatever circumstances, bad town planning or anything like that, a house of ill repute. And I won't spell out what that means on this public forum, but you can work it out for yourself, or otherwise just go Google it. The raw file space, Adobe Camera Raw in this case, is the church. The house of ill repute is your pixel file editor where anything goes. The church is a protected space, an ethical space. Now, like I said earlier, I don't want to get into any spiritual or religious debate here. This is purely an analogy to help you understand the concept. And I'll be clear here, I won't be answering any comments that go down this road, because I think I have mentioned it enough times that you know it's an analogy. It's got nothing to do with anything else besides the discussion when it comes to photo editing and photo processing. So the photograph gets taken. Where does it end up? Well, if you've set your camera to JPEG only, well, then the photograph enters the church or the pure space, because it is a raw file that gets photographed, but immediately and automatically gets processed inside the camera's software. And the JPEG is then shipped off straight across to the house of ill repute automatically. The raw file that came in gets sent out to the graveyard behind the church, and it gets buried forever. Done, finished. The only evidence that the photograph has ever been taken is the now automatically processed JPEG. If you set your camera to RAW plus JPEG, well, then the raw file enters the church. A clone is processed in the side room and shipped off to the house of ill repute. That's the JPEG. But the original is stored away safe, and you can visit it later. It is now protected inside the church building. If you shoot RAW only, this is what I'm going to suggest you do in any case, because there's no reason to shoot a JPEG, which you'll see later. The raw file is housed within then the protection of the church, where it can be developed whenever you choose. So how does a raw file actually get over to the house of ill repute? Well, you can already see there's two ways. One, once it's developed and you click Open in RAW Developer, then the pixel file is created, which usually then opens directly into the editor, Photoshop in this case, depending, of course, on the software. Any changes you made in RAW stay recorded in the sidecar file, filed away on record in the church. But the file itself is now almost given the authority, the blessing to, and that's the clone file that has been made. The pixel file is given the authority, the blessing, if you like, to leave the church and head over to the house of ill repute, whether it likes it or not. A raw file by default cannot knock on that door of the house of ill repute. It cannot. It has to generate a pixel file in order to do so. So once inside, there are many doors leading to different rooms inside the house of ill repute. That file can be handled in all different ways. Like I said, the gloves are off. It can be edited lightly, or it can be completely transformed. That's entirely up to you, the photographer, and how you want to treat it or take it. Right? The second way the file can be accompanied is, and this is a more difficult one to explain, but it can be sent with a letter of protection from the church. If you want the raw file to experience Now, we can't really say that, but if you want the raw file to generate a pixel file and then that pixel file to experience the house of ill repute, but you're not ready to make a final decision on how far you want to take the editing, almost like a test run, it's processed into that pixel file, and then the church hands it to the house of ill repute with a letter. So that as it crosses the road, it goes across with a letter, and the letter states in effect that only certain non-destructive tools may be used on this file. It enters the house of ill repute holding that letter protected, and that's what we call a smart object. So a quick tip here is, while you're here in Camera Raw, all you need to do is hold down the Shift button and click Open instead of clicking on it normally. And the button actually changes the actual picture into a smart object as it opens. For as long as the file is holding that letter, it cannot be pixel bashed about with every tool in Photoshop. Only the non-destructive tools can be used. But at any stage, if that file decides that it's happy and wants to go further, you can tear up the letter. We call this rasterizing the file. And the moment that letter's gone, well, anything goes. These are the only two ways a pixel file can enter the house of ill repute: automatically as a JPEG in camera, or deliberately as a pixel file you have chosen to send over to the house of ill repute. And you can choose whether it is protected or not protected. Once you, the photographer, has made your changes in the editing process, it's then your choice how that file gets presented to the world. And that's what we call a format. So you will pick which format you would like to use. If you want to use a smaller file on a website, or you're wanting to use it in social media, you may choose to use a JPEG or a PNG file. If you're building a website specifically, it's more than likely going to be a JPEG for smaller file size, or maybe the PNG for if you're wanting slightly higher quality. I mean, if you want to go further with the file, if you wanted to print it or put it into a publication, or you're looking for a higher quality file, well, then you'll choose between a TIFF file or a Photoshop file. One more important thing here: while a raw file is in the church being developed, besides ordering the data, that's the exposure, selected areas, darkening, lightening, burning, dodging, all of that sort, you can also decide before it even leaves the church. And this is, if you know what it's going to be used for, you can decide on its size before it even crosses over to the house of ill repute. So you can choose the pixel size based on what you want to do with it at any stage. Then you can go back into the church, find the file, and either keep on developing it, start all over again, or you can send it over as it was developed in the first place, but you can change the actual size of the file. So you can pick up from where you left off, or you can send it back over to the house of ill repute again and again and again, either bigger or smaller, depending on your usage. That for me is a smart workflow, where you keep the file in Camera Raw, protected. You make your changes in Camera Raw, either quality changes or your darkening, lightening, burning, dodging, color, whatever it is, or you continue developing it, whatever it is. And then when you decide to send it over, you can size it for the size that you actually want to use, and then send it over to the editing software. I mean, as you can see, you are in complete control. And one more thing I also want to make clear here. I've already said that a raw file is not a pixel file, and a pixel file is not a raw file. But there is a way that a pixel file can experience the church. And this is what we call a raw file filter. So you are in Photoshop. You're obviously working on a pixel file. And if you decide you would like to experience the developing module within the church, you can choose raw file filter. That simply means that that pixel file will be opened up in the raw module itself, and will allow you to work as if you are processing. Some people just like the raw developing space, so they prefer to just take the file back into that module and then work on it. But it doesn't mean that the pixel file has now become a raw file. What it means is that that pixel file can go back to the church as a visitor, if you like. but it can never become a member again. It can experience the developing module, and when it is done, it can come back with this changes applied. But it was a pixel file, it remains a pixel file, it will never go back to becoming a raw file again. The process is just one way. So my friends, what are we dealing with? We have different software doing different jobs. Bridge and Lightroom help you to manage your pictures, see what's being developed and what hasn't, name them, tag them, and order your work. Just an organized workflow. Lightroom on top of that, plugged into Adobe Camera Raw, or Adobe Camera Raw on its own, if you're using it as standalone software, is the protected, non-destructive space where the data gets ordered, the size gets decided on, and the raw file is instructed on how it needs to behave the day it is called over to the house of ill repute to be used in one form or another. Once a file needs to be realized, it follows the instructions that you have given it. It gets developed according to the instructions that you have put into place. You have taken control over. And with your blessing, it leaves the church as a cloned file and heads over to the house of ill repute to be taken further. And this is worth noting. Every raw file that's ever called into use ends up eventually going through the house of ill repute. Because without it, without becoming a pixel file, the world cannot see or experience it. So you need to find the software that works for you. And yes, AI is coming into processing and editing too, but that doesn't change the underlying system. My suggestion is don't let AI take over. As I said earlier, we don't know where it's going to go, but you're the photographer. You need to make the decisions. You are the human behind the creativity. You need to make sure that you put your creative stamp on the actual picture. You're the one who took the photograph in the first place. You already have a clear idea of where you want to go with it, and now you have the tools to make sure that this can happen. So here's my challenge to you. Go and find one raw file that you may have been too scared to touch. And now that you know that you can't destroy it, open it in Camera Raw this week. Go and have a look at it in Bridge and then open it up in Camera Raw this week and develop it. You don't even have to cross over into Photoshop if you don't like. Just prove to yourself that the church is exactly as safe as I told you it is. Have a look and see that once you have done some processing, how your thumbnail then updates in Bridge, or if you're using Lightroom, the same way. And again, to be clear, today's discussion is about the software and what software you should be using. Today's discussion is not about how to use it. That is something we can always look at later. And again, with a lot of my YouTube discussions, to go deeper into something does require time, and it does require a classroom. But at least now, after this discussion, and once you have downloaded the document, you can at least now understand what the software does. So it'll give you a better sense of how to use it. And if you are still stuck, then you need to be doing some courses on how to actually use the software effectively. If this way of thinking about your workflow has made sense to you, if it's taken some of that fear out of the process, that's exactly what the Osner Studio Atelier is built for. Going further with you, one step at a time, inside a community space that's already walked this exact road. There's a link below if you like to join us here. And don't forget, if you haven't grabbed it yet, then the full companion guide, everything that you need that was covered in today's discussion is waiting for you, and you can download it. So the link is in the description itself. And one more thing before I go. If you've got the technical side sorted, but you still feel like your photographs are technically good or technically fine, but somehow saying nothing, I made a video that deals with it exactly. So you'll see up over here, there's a thumbnail. It's the next video in line. So be sure to watch that. It's called, Are You Technically Brilliant but Artistically Invisible? And it's the natural next step from everything we have spoken about today. And I'll leave you with this. Keep your raw files safe and keep your artistic voice unique, and stay creative. Why? because it's just good for you. I'll see you in the next video. Cheers for now.